Our agenda for today is policies and procedures, planning your drive, safety facts, drive focused, stay safe, aggressive drive, parking vehicles, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. For those of us who have maybe just joined, welcome to the meeting, and please enter your name and agency into the chat box. And now I will turn it over to Justin.
Thank you, Lauren. Next slide, please. So policies and procedures, it's recommended that every organization has a transportation policy that outlines the organization's policies and procedures. This way, your drivers know what to expect and understand what your policies and procedures are. It's recommended that you have them read and then sign off that they actually read the policies and procedures and understand what was written in the policies and procedures. Next slide. It's recommended that an MVR or a motor vehicle records check be done upon hiring process, and follow-up checks done are recommended biannually for drivers over 25 and triannually for drivers that are under 25. And it's a good idea to check with your insurance carrier to see what their regulations are. Some carriers may require it more than twice a year, but it's best if you get with your carrier and understand what their uh, demands are for your drivers. Next slide, please. Know your drivers. You should always know your drivers and know what your drivers' capability and comfort levels are. When you hire a driver, ask informative questions. How many years of experience do you have? What you like about driving? How would you rate your driving? Next slide, please. Know your new hire's experience, fit the vehicle assignment accordingly. Ask questions, what types of vehicles have you driven? Are there any vehicles you're worried about driving? Are there any limitations when it comes to safety, whether your feet can't reach pedals, you can't see over the steering wheel, mirrors can't be adjusted properly for your viewing? And then if you are a driver, make sure you speak up. Make sure you let your manager or supervisor know, hey, this vehicle doesn't work for me, and give them reasons why the vehicle doesn't work for you, especially if it's a safety reason. Next slide, please. Test your driver's vehicle capability. Can the driver safely back up the vehicle? Does the driver use mirrors and know how to use the mirrors properly? Can a driver maneuver the vehicle safely? Does the driver make safe turns? Can a driver stop the vehicle without slamming on the brakes? And if you're a driver and you're uncomfortable driving a vehicle, don't just flow with it. Maybe your supervisor or manager can give you some remedial training on the vehicle so you feel safer driving the vehicle. But don't be afraid to speak up. Make sure everyone knows that, hey, I'm unsure of this vehicle, I'm uncomfortable with this vehicle. That way you avoid getting into an accident. Next slide, please. And ask and get your driver's feedback. Ask driver, what did you like about the vehicle? What didn't you like about the vehicle? Did you feel comfortable driving the vehicle? Is there anything that would make you feel more comfortable driving the vehicle? And if you're a driver, make sure you're communicating these items to your manager or supervisor. Hey, this would make me feel better as a driver if I had, a back support, or if, we had pedal extensions, if we had mirrors that adjusted better. So make sure, you're voicing this to your manager or supervisor. Next slide, please. So how drivers should manage vehicle issues. If there's any issues with the vehicle prior to leaving the site, let your fleet manager or supervisor know immediately, and request a different vehicle. Never drive a vehicle that has a safety issue. If there's a problem while off-site, pull over to a safe location, call your fleet manager or supervisor, and explain what the issue is, and let them explain the next steps for you. Next slide, please. So you want to make sure your communication level between the driver, supervisor, or manager is always open communication, that everybody knows what's going on. Everyone knows, everybody's comfort and safety level with vehicles. Next slide, please. This here is an example of a pre-trip inspection checklist. This is mandatory, it's not optional. If MAG comes to your site with the FTA, they're going to want to see copies of your pre-trip and post-trip inspection checklists. So just FYI, I've been through it 3 times now, and they've asked for these every single time. So make sure that you have these on hand and you have them in records. Next slide, please. And this is a copy of the post-trip inspection checklist. Again, mandatory. You must do a pre-trip and post-trip inspection on your vehicles. And if you do find anything that's wrong with the vehicle, make sure you bring it to your manager or supervisor's attention immediately. Next slide, please. Know your vehicles. If you're brand new to a vehicle, make sure you're instructed on where everything's located on a vehicle: windshield wipers, lights, mirror adjustments. These are really important safety items that you must know how to use before you start driving the vehicle. How to turn your headlights on, how to turn your windshield wipers on, how to put fluid on the windshield, how to adjust your mirrors, how to adjust your seats. Make sure these items are taught to the drivers. And if you're a driver, make sure that before you drive a vehicle, you are comfortable with knowing where every feature of the vehicle is. Next slide, please. Again, know your vehicle. It's always surprising how many people don't know how to turn on the hazards on the vehicle. If you see the double triangle symbol, whether it's a little circle or it's a rectangle or a square, make sure that you know how to find that. How to set the emergency brake. Every vehicle is different. Some have the pull handle, right next to the driver's right arm. Some have the foot push pedal, off to the left bottom. And then make sure you know how to release the brake, whether it's pressing the button, pushing the brake handle back down, or pulling the lever to release the emergency brake. Location of your gas tank. I always get flabbergasted when people tell me that they don't know which side of the vehicle the gas tank's on. It's right in your face. If you look at your gas gauge, the little gas symbol points to which side of the vehicle the gas tank is on. Next slide, please. Make sure your brake lights are working properly. If you have one of the big Transtar buses, make sure your front and back brake lights are working, but also make sure your brake light on the top of the vehicle is also working. Because a lot of times that's the only light people are going to see. Next slide, please. Make sure your headlights are working properly. Make sure you know how to use both high beams and low beams and when to use them. Don't drive around constantly with your high beams on, because that can get real annoying to other motorists. Make sure your tire pressure on your vehicles are inflated properly, and make sure you know how to check for inflation. If you don't know what your inflation should be, just open up your driver side panel door, and there's a little sticker on the inside that shows you what your PSI level should be for that vehicle, both front and back tires. Next slide, please. Make sure your tires are in good condition. Listed below are some examples, what it looks like for an underinflated tire, an overinflated tire, whether it's an alignment problem or a failed shock or strut. If you see any of these wear patterns on your tires, that means there's an issue. Bring it up to your manager, supervisor, or fleet manager. Next slide, please. If you're driving a larger vehicle, whether it's a transit or one of the Transtar buses, make sure you know what your vehicle's height is. The last thing you want to do is try to go over a low underpass and get stuck, or try to get into a parking garage and get stuck. You should always have the vehicle's height clearance, somewhere posted where it's visible for the driver, whether it's on the sun visor, whether it's on the side panel, somewhere where the driver can see it at all times. Next slide, please. When driving a vehicle, pay attention to a vehicle's turning radius. When you do this, you can avoid hitting the curb and damaging rims and tires. If you're a driver and you're having issues with making right turns or left turns, bring it up to your manager or supervisor or a fleet manager. That way they can actually do some remedial training with you to make you more comfortable with making these turns. Next slide. Your cameras. Make sure if you have backup cameras, make sure the backup cameras are working properly. Make sure you can see what you're supposed to be seeing in the cameras. Seatbelts. Make sure your seatbelts are properly working. Don't just assume because a seatbelt is there that it's working properly. You want to click it and then unclick it to make sure it's working properly. If a seatbelt is not working properly, you need to tag it unserviceably. Let your service manager or fleet manager or supervisor know, hey, this vehicle's seatbelt is not working. It needs to be replaced. And never let someone sit into a seat where the seatbelt is not working. Next slide, please. All drivers should be given adequate rest. It's recommended that drivers are given at least 10 hours from the end of their shift to the beginning of the next shift. Adequate rest will help drivers stay alert and avoid distracted driving habits. Drivers should be giving a resting point throughout the day to refresh. So if you're a driver who drives both AM and PM, make sure you're getting a resting point in the middle of the day to refresh and get your mindset. Next slide, please. It's always best to plan for any drive, whether it's a short or long drive. Give yourself time to adjust for heavy traffic, accidents, or closed roads. Here in Arizona, with all the constant construction going on, make sure you're aware of what the current traffic situation and conditions are before leaving. Avoid letting traffic turn you into an aggressive driver. Next slide, please. Distracted driving, a big thing, I see it daily. Longer commutes, an increase in heavy traffic, the availability of in-vehicle technology, you got all these new screens and new radio systems. Make sure you're not being one of the individuals who is constantly being distracted by what's going on your dashboard. Pay attention to the road and your passengers. That's what you should be focused on. You always want to drive focus and stay safe. Next slide, please. Distracted driving estimated to be a factor in between 25 and 30% of all traffic crashes. That's 4,000 or more crashes a day. Events inside and outside a vehicle can distract a driver. Adverse roadways, weather conditions, requires the driver's full attention. Make sure you know what your surroundings and situations are when driving. Next slide, please. While taking one's eye off the road presents obvious risk, activities that take a driver's mind from driving is just as risky. A driver's ability to manage distractions varies widely and can change from day to day depending on the level of stress and fatigue. If you're feeling burnt out, fatigued, let someone know. It's probably unsafe for you to drive. Next slide, please. Distracted drivers fail to recognize potential hazards in the road and react more slowly to traffic conditions, decreasing their margin of safety. Research suggests that distracted driving increases the risk of rear end and single vehicle crashes. Next slide, please. So do you know when you're driving distracted? Has that anyone ever told you, hey, pay attention to the road? Has a passenger in the car screamed or gasped because something you did or did not do? You almost hit a vehicle, made a turn too fast because you almost missed the turn. That's a sign of distracted driving. Next slide, please. Did you run a stop sign unintentionally? Were you looking in the mirror, talking to someone in the back seat, maybe changing the radio station, daydreaming about what you're going to do later or on the weekend? All distracted driving. Next slide, please. Have you ever slammed on your brakes because you didn't see the car in front of you stop? Maybe you were texting, maybe you're putting on makeup, maybe you're eating, maybe you're changing a radio station, maybe you're combing or brushing your hair, picking something you dropped off the floor. All distracted driving. Next slide, please. You don't remember driving from one place to another. This can be, real hazardous. Driving without sleeping or getting enough sleep. Maybe you're sick or ill, on medication, too much stress, talking on the phone. If you're having these symptoms, let someone know. Maybe it's time for you to, take a sick day. Get your body and your mind recuperated. Next slide, please. Have other drivers honk their horn at you. Lights turn green, but you don't move. You swerve into another lane. You forget to turn on your lights. You don't use turn signals. You're driving under the speed limit. Next slide, please. Did you miss your exit, your turn or exit? Maybe you're talking on the phone. Maybe you're texting, eating, daydreaming, lack of sleep or rest. Again, all signs of distracted driving. Next slide, please. Have you forgotten where you're going? Uh, Lack of sleep or rest again, stressed out, sick or ill, on medication. If you're sick or ill, and on any medication that impairs your driving, you should not be driving. Maybe it's possible signs of Alzheimer's. If you get to a point where you're always forgetting where you're going, maybe it's time to see your doctor. Let your doctor know what's going on. Next slide, please. Just to recap, these are all signs of distracted driving. If you've ever encountered any of this or had anybody bring this up to you, it's distracted driving. You want to try to avoid distracted driving as much as possible. Next slide, please. So we always want to drive focused, stay safe, avoid distracted driving. Be a safe driver out there. Don't be, one of the individuals out there who are driving and are more involved what's going on around them or in their head than what they're supposed to be doing. Is getting your passengers from one point to the next point in the safest manner possible. Next slide, please. Did you know that even the most routine activities are potential distracting while driving? A national survey was done. 97% of people, admitted to talking to passengers while driving. I mean, sure, if your kids are in the back seat, if you're driving your personal vehicle, you're going to be talking to your kids. If a participant or client is in the vehicle while you're transporting them from their home to your program, and they ask you a question, make sure your eyes are staying on the road when you're responding to them. Maybe 95% of people admitted to looking at the text on a cell phone. 90%, adjusting vehicles, climates, or radio controls, eating meals or snacks, talking on a cell phone, tending to children, reading a map or publication, grooming, preparing for work. These are all signs of distracted driving. I mean, I know every morning I notice it when I'm driving, whether it's someone fixing their hair, someone eating their breakfast while driving, somebody who is, you know, shuffling through paperwork while driving. So, you know, these are habits you want to try to avoid and drive safe, you know, without distractions. Next slide, please. As a driver, your number one responsibility is to get yourself and your passengers to their destination safely. When behind the wheel, you always need to be alert and focused. At 55 miles an hour, a vehicle travels the length of a football field in 3.7 seconds. This is no time for a mini snooze. Being an attentive driver and looking out for drivers who isn't is increasingly important. So always want to drive focus, stay safe. Always pay attention to what you're doing and what other drivers are doing. That way you can avoid accidents. Next slide, please. Just some safety facts for on the road. Drowsy driving causes more than 100,000 crashes each year, resulting in 40,000 injuries and 1,550 deaths. Crashes caused by drowsy driving are often serious crashes and occur most often in high-speed rural highways when the driver is alone. Drowsy driving can happen to anyone. A recent National Sleep Foundation study revealed that 51% of adults have driven while drowsy. 17% report having fallen asleep while driving. Next slide, please. Be aware of your behavior and behavior of others on the road during the late nights, early mornings, and mid-afternoon, when drowsy driving driving crashes are most likely to occur. Plan a rest stop during these hours. Get a full night's rest before driving. If you become tired while driving, stop. A short nap, 15 to 45 minutes, or consuming caffeine can help temporarily. Next slide, please. Stop at regular intervals when driving long distance. Get out of the car every 2 hours to stretch your legs and walk briskly. This helps revigorate the mind and get your blood flowing. Set a realistic goal for the number of miles you can safely drive each day. Avoid taking medication that causes drowsiness. Again, if you're sick and you're not feeling well, make sure that you use one of your sick days. Don't risk putting one of your clients or participants' lives in danger. And especially if you're on any kind of medication that alters your mind state, make sure you're not driving. Next slide, please. Did you know that when you're driving drowsy, some warning signs of fatigue, you can't remember the last few miles driven. You hit a rumble strip or drift from one lane to another. Your thoughts are wandering and disconnected. You're yawning repeatedly. You have difficult focusing, keeping your eyes open. You tailgate or miss traffic signs. You have trouble keeping your head up. You keep pulling your vehicle back into the lane. All signs, of fatigue and distracted driving. I mean, if you're not mentally focused on or can't mentally focus on what you're doing, then you shouldn't be driving. Next slide, please. Impaired driving. On our congested roadways, it's more important than ever to drive with a clear head and sharp focus. Make it a life-governing rule not to drive when you had too much to drink. On average, a driver makes over 200 decisions per mile. So it's critical that the driver makes the decision to drive alert before getting behind the wheel. Not only will they be a safer driver, but they will be in a better position to defend themselves from other drivers who are not driving safely. So always drive focused, stay safe. Next slide. Some statistics here. Alcohol and impaired driving accounts for about 40% of all fatal crashes. About 3 in every 10 Americans will be involved with an alcohol-related crash in some time in their life. Research shows that alcohol is a contributing factor in 39% of all work-related crashes. 9 out of 10 insurance companies automatically cancel the policy of a driver convicted of a DWI or DUI violation. Consequently, a driver must find a high-risk insurance company and face substantial rate increases. Next slide, please. Nearly 1.5 million people are arrested each year for driving while intoxicated or under the influence. A DWI or DUI conviction on a person's driving record may prevent them from getting a job, receiving a promotion, or even result in a job loss. Many companies have corrective action programs that suspend a company's driving privileges for a DWI or DUI violation. Next slide, please. Alcohol involvement is high at night between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. on weekends and on holidays. Driving skills, especially judgment, are impaired in most people long before they exhibit any visible signs of drunkenness. Some people say, oh, it's only 1 or 2 drinks. Well, that 1 or 2 drinks can cause you your license and your job. Never a good idea to even chance it. Next slide, please. Celebrations are a part of our lives, and sometimes they include alcohol. They should not, however, involve impaired driving. Decide who is going to be a designated driver before the party starts. Be the kind of coworker who will take the keys away from somebody who's had too much to drink. If you're impaired, make the safe choice, to get a Uber, a Lyft, get a taxi, whatever you need to do. Just don't drive while intoxicated. Next slide, please. Can you spot an impaired driver on the road? Drivers under the influence of alcohol often display certain characteristics in driving behaviors, such as weaving, swerving, drifting, or straddling the center line, driving on the wrong side of the road. Here in Arizona, that's becoming a big thing, especially on the weekends. Driving at a very slow speed, stopping without cause or braking erratically, turning abruptly or responding slowly to traffic signals, driving with the windows down, especially in cold weather, driving with your headlights off at night. If you're out on the road and you spot a driver, call 911. Let them know, hey, I see this driver doing these unsafe practices. I think they might be under the influence. Don't ever feel bad about calling 911 because you could save someone's life. Next slide, please. Aggressive driving. As traffic congestion continues to grow, motorists commuting to and from work and traveling from business purposes often find themselves caught up in bottleneck or significant delays, wasting time and reducing productivity. Next slide, please. This situation creates a high level of frustration and can spark aggressive driving among these overwhelmed drivers. To protect against aggressive driving, remember that your primary responsibility is to drive, focus, and stay safe. Next slide, please. Start by correcting your own unsafe driving habits that are likely to endanger or antagonize or provoke other drivers. Keep your cool in traffic. Be patient and courteous to other drivers, and don't take their actions personally. If someone honks their horn at you, don't take it personally. Say, hey, I'm doing what I can do. Next slide, please. If you think you have a problem, seek help. Look for anger or stress management classes that can help you, deal with aggressive driving or angry driving. Reduce your stress on the road by allowing plenty of time to reach your destination. Plan your route in advance and alter your schedule, so you can avoid, being stressed out. Next slide, please. If despite all planning, you're going to be, arriving late for work or for an appointment or something, accept it. Hey, it is what it is. I'm going to be late. If you're stopping traffic and you have a point where you can call your manager or supervisor, hey, I'm stuck in traffic, nothing I can do about it. I'm going to be late. Just accept it and move on. Make every attempt to safely move out of an aggressive driver's way. If a hostile motorist tries to pick a fight with you, don't engage with them. Don't make eye contact. Don't respond to them. Ignore any gestures and refuse to return them. If someone, flips you the bird, just ignore it. Sometimes it's hard to do, but ignore it and just act like they're not even there. If they still keep, being aggressive towards you at that point, then call 911. Let them know, hey, there's an aggressive motorist, and explain to them what's going on, the situation, where you're located, what your vehicle looks like, what their vehicle looks like. If you have a description of that motorist, give them the description. If you get a plate number, even better, let them know what the plate number is. They can issue citations for aggressive driving here in Arizona. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Are you driving like everyone else, or are you driving aggressively? So just some statistics here. Tailgating cause 80% of all crashes. 96% of people admit to tailgating. Passing in the middle lane, 96% of people admit to doing that. Driving 10 miles or more above the speed limit, 94% admit to that. Making rude gestures, 90%. So all these percentages here, everything down, all the way down to driving 10 miles under the speed limit. 25% of people admit to doing that. I know here in Arizona, you can actually be cited for going under the speed limit. It's called impeding the process of motorists. So you can actually get a ticket for that. So, make sure that you're staying within the posted speed, especially in traffic zones, where there's construction. If you are speeding through a construction zone and you're caught, depending on the officer, he can either double or triple the fine that you're going to be issued. Next slide, please. Lastly, but not least, parking your vehicles. Always know how to properly park your vehicle. If driving a vehicle with a handicap plate or placard, unload your passengers, then proceed to park your vehicle to the designated handicap spot. When parking in a regular parking spot, you want to give yourself an out. What that means is you want to pull into a parking space, that maybe there is a double parking space, and you can pull straight forward. That way you're in a position to give yourself an easy out. If you can pull through the parking space, like I said, to give yourself an easy out. If you're in a smaller parking lot, it is recommended that you back into your parking space. By doing this, it gives yourself a safest exit when leaving. That way, you can see what's coming around on all sides of you. Next slide, please. If you're taking the vehicle into a parking garage, you must know the height of your vehicle. I touched on this earlier. You should always have your vehicle's clearance height posted where the driver can easily visibly see it. So make sure that you're matching what your clearance height of your vehicle is with the clearance height of a parking garage is. Or if there is a low underpass and you're unsure, there's always going to be a sign posted letting you know what the clearance height is. Next slide, please. So these are examples of what I put my drivers through. So when I give my drivers a road test, this is what I look for. I make sure that they know how to do a pre-trip inspection properly. And they must get yes on every single one of these items. Next slide, please. And then part of it is vehicle operations, and they must safely get a yes on all these items. And then finally, post-trip inspection. Next slide, please. So they must be able to perform the post-trip inspection properly to my standards. So if your organization, isn't doing this, I do recommend it. That way, your drivers, or if you are a driver, that if someone surprisingly comes out and does a visit on you and does a ride along with you, that you're going to be doing everything properly to meet standards. So if anyone has questions on this and wants more information or details, please feel free to reach out to me. Next slide, please. and then we'll open up for questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Justin? I'm not seeing any in the chat right now.
If you think of questions later, just feel free to reach out, and Lauren will make sure I get the questions over to me, and then I'll respond to you as soon as possible.
Yep, if you have any questions, go ahead and send me an email and I will get those to Justin. If you would like a certificate, please send me an email and I will send you a certificate over for this training. If there are no questions, I will give you back some of your day, and thank you for being here with us.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Lauren.
Yes, Dee Dee.
Hi. I just want to say thank you, Justin. You always do a great job in your in your workshops and trainings. A lot of good information. I greatly appreciate the clearance of the vehicles. I have seen vehicles kind of miss that clearance. Thank you so much. I also want to remind if you are a subrecipient, please ensure that you put your name and organization in the chat so that we can track your attendance here. That would be great. And thank you. If anybody has any questions now or any questions after, please forward them to MAG staff or Justin directly, and he can go ahead and follow up with that. Justin, you always have, like I said, you always have a great work training, a lot of great information, and this is one of the most popular trainings that we have. We always exceed over our anticipated, people attending, but that's why it's really important that we capture your name and organization, especially for Section 5310 subrecipient. Participation is required. But Justin, thank you so much for that. We will be posting additional workshops and trainings available for the remainder of the year. So thank you.
Thanks, Dee Dee.
And and as always, I love the tip regarding the gas, where your gas tank is. When I found out about that when I was attending your meetings. I don't know, it was so simple. I'm like, is it an American vehicle? Is it a European vehicle? But it's indicated right there. So thank you so much for that tip.
No problem.
Okay. Again, if there are no longer any questions, and thank you everybody for providing your name and your organization. We will keep the chat open, but thank you again, Justin, for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right.